Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everybody. Hey, welcome to this episode of the podcast. Glad to have you here. And today's episode we got a very special guest that I guarantee is going to answer your questions. Because I guarantee so many of you right now would be the first part of the year. You're like, what am I going to do? How is this year going to be different? What kind of changes do I need to make? Is there a roadmap to success that I can follow? I know this because I'm answering so many questions from people. I get you guys reaching out to me, asking me questions. How do I do this? Or I want to do something different. Want this year to be different. I want my life to be different. So today's special guest is somebody who's a rock star who's got a true passion for helping investors and entrepreneurs find that financial roadmap to success. Now, this guy didn't just start off with a silver spoon in his mouth. He served his country for 20 years here and thank him for doing that. He's also basically kind of had a oh shit, I got to do something fast when he and his wife had triplets right off the bat. So we're honored to have the man, the myth, the legend from Pantheon Investments, badass podcaster, badass author, Mr. Dave Wilcott join us. Dave, how you doing today, bud?
Doing awesome, Scott. Really grateful to connect with you and your audience. And yeah, really appreciate that opening.
No problem. Available for birthdays and bar mitzvahs if you ever need me for one. All right.
Perfect.
Now, a few years back, you wrote a really impactful book out there. You went out there and you wrote it after your 20 years in business stuff like that. The Holistic Wealth Strategy, Your Roadmap to Financial Freedom. Um, a great book. Can you dive a little bit into that and why it's so impactful for so many?
Yeah, for sure. So it really kind of started with my journey, Scott. And I was raised in a middle class family. And, frankly, we didn't talk about money,
Right.
right? It just wasn't talked about. It was really taboo. All I knew was dad worked really hard, kind of came home late and everything. And I was told the recipe for success was go to school, get good grades, you're going to get a job, right? So I kind of followed down that path, went into the Marine Corps, and really got to the opportunity to serve my country, travel the world, get shot at, and learn a lot of things, about yourself. And shortly thereafter, I transitioned into the corporate world. And at the same time, my wife and I were raising a family. We had an 18-month-old toddler. And then on October 24th, 2000, we literally welcomed triplets into the world and quadrupled the size of our family. And I got to tell you, for any of the fathers out there, I mean, you can just imagine, right? Just holding three babies in your arms at the same time. And Scott, the first thing going through my mind was just, how am I going to provide for financial security for my family, right? So I went to see my financial planner, and he just told me, hey, max out your 401k. And they have these programs called 529 plans for kids, and it was right then that I knew, building wealth as a retail investor in the stock market was not the answer. So I started learning and investing in all kinds of alternatives. Unfortunately, I didn't get exposed to notes back then, but I invested in everything from raw land to single family to multifamily to office to retail to oil and gas, a lot of different private assets. And this is, again, back in 2000, right, when there weren't that many assets. Fast forward 20 years, built a phenomenal portfolio. And then I really wrote the holistic wealth strategy to help other people figure out what is the blueprint for actually building true legacy wealth, outside of this, stock market, Wall Street driven type of paradigm that we're all kind of exposed to and we learn from. So the holistic wealth strategy is really a 5 phase framework with which to help people really think about their wealth, right? And how they can accelerate it.
I love it. What are those five pillars? And then how did you learn? What sources did you do to teach yourself about these different opportunities out there? Because I guarantee so many folks are feeling the same way. Like, oh shit, what am I going to do now? Maybe they don't have triplets, but they're thinking, how do I provide? The market's a chaotic world. There's a lot of people struggling out there right now. How can they change the cycle, and put themselves on the right path to financial freedom?
Yeah, exactly. And it really is. I mean, this strategy is an encapsulation of my journey over 20 years. And so it all really starts, Scott, with actually creating a vision for yourself. Because if you don't have a target, you're going to miss every time. So sitting down and getting crystal clear clarity on, what does life look like for you and your family in the next 10 years, in the next 20 years, right? And literally, like if you've ever read Cameron Herold's book, Vivid Vision, right? An
Yeah,
amazing book on
great
just
book.
describing, what do your relationships look like? What do they feel like, right? Where do you live, right? How much time do you spend at work? How much time do you spend off? How much time do you spend traveling, right? What does the size of your portfolio look like? Where does it sit? All of these different things, because once you actually have this vision in place, this is what's going to actually drive you to get through the cycles that we have in life, right? The ups and downs. And when things are great, it's all good. But how do we break through doors, right? When times get tough, and you're doubting yourself and things like that. It's all about having this vision so we know where we're going to. We're on this continual path.
How much how much of your mind is important to achieving success? Having that trained or overcoming those self-doubts that everybody has out there. Because let's face it, the world is not a friendly place, but I also think the most successful people are probably the most focused and driven and have done the most work on that melon or that the 6 to 8 inches between ears out there. What have you found with that, Dave?
Scott, you literally hit the nail on the head, right? This is a beautiful segue into phase one of the framework. It is all about mindset. 80% of this game is mindset. And just think about it for a second, right? What is the difference between Elon Musk, who's talking about interplanetary travel, one week, right? And, creating some kind of, new vehicle, right? The next, to someone you went to high school with that might be in the same town, same circle of friends, and the same job, right? It's all actually mindset, right? So, what can we do to actually create goals and habits that support our vision and are constantly elevating us, right? To actually get there, because I can tell you in this journey that I spent, 99 out of 100 people would constantly tell me, I would have a great new real estate deal. And what would they tell? I'd be sitting down at Thanksgiving dinner and people would say, that's too risky. My financial planner says that's a really bad idea, right? Why would you do something like that, right? Everyone's saying, no, you shouldn't do that. But look, I mean, as an entrepreneur, I just started asking questions, Scott, like, does it really make sense to defer my taxes in government sponsored qualified plans, which the one thing I could probably be certain on in the future is that tax rates will go up in the
Yeah.
future, right? So why would I want to defer that, right? I'd rather pay taxes on the seed rather than the harvest. So there's all these things that you start to kind of expose some of the myths around conventional financial planning and wealth building. It's really, frankly, a system for Wall Street, right, and big companies to win, right, with all of those plans. It really is, and just how you like to be on the right side of a note transaction. Right. We need to be on the right side of that investment as well. And if you're a retail investor on the stock market, you're really just a pawn in someone else's system.
Well, that's so true. That's why they call it the rat race, right? You're just on a, normal cycle thing, and we all know things have changed. It's no longer our parents or grandparents' way of living, of working 40 hours a week for 40 years, retiring 40%. You know, you've got to change things up. The markets are changing. And you've got to have that, like you said, that strength to be different, to be that 1% that goes against the grain in charting your own course and then staying the course as well too.
100%. Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
So then after that, we move into phase two. And phase two, Scott, your net worth is directly proportional to your financial IQ.
Yes, it
Okay.
is.
And this is why
Can,
I,
can you say that again? That's quote worthy, everybody. You need to
yeah,
listen to this to write it down. Say that again, Dave.
your net worth is directly proportional to your financial IQ. And that's why I really applaud you, Scott, and what you're doing, right? By educating people about an asset class that most people just don't really understand, right? And there's so much opportunity there. Why give all of your hard-earned precious capital, and just outsource it to someone in Wall Street who then diversifies it across 150 just different funds? And frankly, the statistics on that is, not even 10% of them can even beat the averages.
Right.
Right. So I'm not really sure what you're actually paying for there. So what we want to do is actually focus on increasing our financial IQ. And you and I have talked about this before, exactly, which is one of Warren Buffett's top principles, which is only invest in things you understand. Right. So whether that be notes, or getting into some version of real estate, such as multifamily or self storage, whatever your niche is, or oil and gas or anything, you really need to get educated and understand how these markets work, because that will pay bigger dividends. And when you invest in private assets, this is also really interesting. That was actually never taught to me, or really, it's not taught anywhere, frankly. But other people might say, well, I can get exposure to real estate. I can get exposure to private equity through, let's say, a hedge fund, or let's say a REIT. But when you understand what's happening is you're doing a transaction through Wall Street, which is really the middlemen. So you're not getting a direct bite out of the apple. And when you can invest directly in Main Street, right, what happens is you're a direct limited partner or general partner in that opportunity that gives you tax benefits, cash flow, and upside potential. Right. And if I were to compare that to, investing in public equities, for the most part, it's really just linear in nature, where you're hoping stocks might go up in the long term.
Yeah, hoping has never been a successful way to
No.
achieve wealth. Plenty of people doing that in Vegas every day. Come on, black. Come on, red. Let's hope you do that. But one of the most things that I stand at, as you were talking about there, I think about how when I was learning finance and learning that aspect of things, and how really brainwashed people are. And this is no offense, it's because that we see it all the time. And banks and Wall Street has done really good at saying that, oh, if you want to invest in something safe, you need to shoot for a 1 to 4% return, and mid risk is 4 to 8, and risky is going to be anything above 8 to 12%. And I've always found that, now hindsight being 2020, how infuriating that is to teach people that aspect of things, when you and I both know that, hey, making 8 to 12 or greater than that isn't risky if you know the assets and the opportunities that are available for you out there, right?
Yeah, 100%.
Now, where do you see the biggest failure of folks going from the different phases? You know, is it that mindset? Is it they surround themselves? Are they just, or a lack of patience? What's your insight on that, Dave?
Yeah, so good question. And like I said, it all kind of starts with that sequencing that we talked about. Like, if you don't have a vision, you're going to say, like, okay, hey, my friend just talked to me about a note deal, and like, I invested in this note deal. I invested in a syndication. I've got this next stock pick, right? You actually have no true strategy. That's probably one of the biggest mistakes that we see with investors that we talk to, is people don't have a cohesive strategy. The only thing they have at best is, maybe they're working with a financial planner, like I said, who's then giving them some straight allocation into just paper assets, right? In stocks, bonds, mutual funds. So you have to have the vision, and then you have to have the mindset, really, to understand that you can invest in an asset class like notes, or syndications, or alternatives, or whether that even be crypto or angel or some other private assets that may be more aligned to your own investor DNA, and frankly can produce what I like to call asymmetric type of returns, which is you get a greater yield and you actually have a lower risk, right? But if you don't have the mindset to that, you're never going to get there at all, because you're going to say, again, it's too risky. Think about this for a second, right? Why does a financial planner says that real estate deal is too risky, right? It's because they don't get compensated on it for the most part, right? Their business model is on assets under management. They're also not trained to actually, speak around, real estate or some other asset classes. And it's funny that they actually call real estate an alternative, right? Because it's probably one of the oldest asset classes in history, right?
So true. I always say that you need to seek counsel, not advice. Counsel from somebody who's been there. Advice is like assholes. Everybody's got one. Doesn't mean it's right. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
What are some of your favorite things of doing or working with clients out there to help them get that mindset aspect of things? You have any favorite books, any favorite strategies for that? You have any of your own mentors or counselors or gurus you've helped that have helped you out in the long run?
Well, look, I mean, personally, I mean, I spend over six figures a year myself in terms of investing in myself. This is probably like a really great takeaway for people. Like, if you get nothing else out of this podcast, just think about this insight for a moment: is that you are your greatest asset on your balance sheet. You should literally list yourself on your balance sheet, because what you can produce is not only a 10x return, not an 8% return, a 12% return, but a 10x, a 100x, a 1000x type of return. Right. So anytime that I can invest in myself, whether that's through reading amazing podcasts like this, masterminds such as you have, we have a mastermind community as well. Those types of learnings. I think I have five different coaches right now across the board between my health, my mindset, our business, right? So many different aspects of actually growing, because you want to be surrounding yourself. This is the Jim Rohn quote, right? That you're a product of the five people that you spend most of your time with. So if I have coaches that are multiple levels above me, I'm going to continue to expand my capacity and where I go. So look at yourself as a number one biggest asset, right? And where can you constantly invest in yourself? And that's, not only in your mindset. And here's another interesting, takeaway. This is one of the things, I've really learned from a billionaire and some centimillionaire communities, is that we all think of wealth as really this financial capital, that we have, right? But in reality, right, money is really just currency, which is current, which is just electricity. It's just energy, right? So as you create money, you can either amplify your energy in a positive direction, or frankly, in a negative direction, like we see a lot on
Yeah.
TV. But there's also five other forms of capital. There's intellectual capital, there's spiritual capital, there's human capital, there's emotional capital, right? All these other forms of capital that you can invest in. And so there were times in my journey, Scott, where, I didn't have capital, right? I wanted to do that next real estate deal, but I was looking under rocks for capital, trying to figure things out, be creative. So what did I do? Well, I worked on my relationship capital. You could be one relationship away from the biggest opportunity of your life and not even know it. Right. So, how are you developing your relationship capital, right? Things like that. Or, like we talked about, intellectual capital, right? Increasing your financial IQ so you can get smarter and make sure that, the effort you're putting in, you're getting smarter so that, the yield on what you're putting in is going to be exponential coming out on the other side.
Yeah, I'm a big believer that we've never been in a better place for intellectual capital than we are right now.
Yeah.
The ease of being able to share ideas or share your knowledge out there, leveraging, artificial intelligence to help that to reach the right people. But I also believe, like you said, the relationship capital has never been more important than it is right now. It's kind of that pendulum swung back from what we dealt with from 2020 and beyond here a little bit. I think people really are craving those relationships, whether it's in person or over Zoom or networking or masterminds like you and I have. People really are craving that aspect of attention and community to help guide them on the right path to success, right?
Yeah, for sure. So, Scott, I'd like to go back and just continue our
Yes.
our, our framework here to keep the listeners going, right? So, So as we have developed a good mindset, we've got a vision. Now we're getting smarter on where we can invest. We go into phase three, which is actually all about infrastructure and team building. Right. So no matter what your net worth is, we want to be able to protect it and build a fortress around your wealth. So we use structures such as infinite banking that are really solid structures, right, to actually, create sovereignty and control over your capital. That is huge. Tax strategy is absolutely huge. 98% of the industry are actually tax preparers and just filing your taxes, right? But especially if you're an entrepreneur, I mean, you should be paying no more than 20% in taxes. And ideally, you can get that closer to zero by understanding how the tax code works. And then, we talked about we have a software platform that actually puts everything together called Pantheon Wealth OS, so you can actually track and manage your performance, right? Because if you don't measure something, you can't improve it. Right? It's that kind of simple. So we want to create this infrastructure really around our wealth, and that's phase three.
I love it. I love it. I love it. Talk a little more about your software there. That's a huge thing I think people lack on because yeah, I think you and I both know what you track changes is what gets done, and what you don't track never sees any type of improvement on, right, Dave?
Yeah, I've struggled for so many years, and especially in these private assets, right? That,
Yeah.
one of the only challenges is like, okay, how do I compare these things? How do I create a portfolio and say, you know what? I want a portfolio and I want to say, I want to be 20% in notes. I want to be 10% in precious metals. I want 40% in real estate and, whatever. How do you balance that? Or another great scenario is we're all trying to create financial freedom, right? And passive income. So rather than 20 spreadsheets, how can I forecast income and say, you know what, in the next 3 years, I've got 400K and passive income. And in the next 8 years, I'm going to hit 1 million. And that's my target, right? So my target is 8 years in passive income of 1 million a year. But can I shortcut that now? Now that I know what the target is, right? We want to optimize. And now so I can say what other kind of deal can I do? How can I adjust my portfolio? Because it's absolutely critical that we're really measuring this stuff on an ongoing basis and really thinking like a family office does about their wealth.
Yeah, that's a great way to point it. Thinking like a family office, but I think, and I know you would agree to this as well too. One of the most important members is your spouse too, and I'm sure your wife is. You and her are communicating, sharing these things, setting the same goal, and having the same dreams of where you want to accomplish things. And that's one of the most, I think, one of the most important things out there too for folks is have that supportive spouse and sharing what you want to accomplish, huh?
Well, 100%. And then also just think about that aspect of it. Wouldn't it be great if you could just sit down with your spouse once a quarter and you could log into one
Yeah.
application and say, hey, honey, here's our net worth, right? Here's our passive income. These are the assets that are performing. These are the non-performing. Where do we want to adjust? And what do we want to do? And how do we want to change our goals, right? And all in front of that, that's all driven by our vision, by our values, right? The things that we hold important. So we're actually living life intentionally and using our financial capital to steward that.
What counsel can you give to folks out there that are struggling right now? They've maybe hit an age and found themselves unhireable, or they've been laid off, or they're dealing with turmoil in their not only their work but their also financial future.
Look, if it's from a work standpoint, we live at probably one of the greatest times in history with the advances of technology and AI and things absolutely at your fingertips. No matter where you live in the world, there is something you can do. You can create some type of side hustle. But my recommendation is to, this has been interesting advice I've gotten from a lot of, centimillionaires, ultra high net worth, is that self awareness is one of the most important traits that you can have. So the more you can understand yourself, right, in your instinctual patterns, how you like to do work, what are your strengths, do some deep reflection, understand those strengths, and then put those strengths to work where you can create value, right? Money is nothing but an exchange of value. right? So the more value you can create in the world, the more capital you're going to create. So get out of thinking that we need to be in this time and effort type economy. Think about how you can create value in, based upon your strengths in the world, right? And then if you can do that for one person, you could do that for 100 people or 1,000 people and scale that.
So true. So true. What's the next path, pillar in your
Yeah,
roadmap?
so the next one is phase four, and this is pretty fun, Scott, because there's a lot of people who say, you know what, Dave, that's pretty cool. I'm with you. I want to jump into this. I've got the right mindset. We're doing all this, but I don't have any, free capital floating around to go invest in that next deal, or maybe I want to invest in a note, right? But I don't have any capital. Well, in this phase, we call this asset repositioning. Over 90% of Americans have money in two places. It's in government sponsored qualified plans, right? Where the government's telling you when you can access your money and how much you're going to take out, what the tax rate is going to be, or it's in trapped equity in their primary residence, right? So let's get a little bit creative here and say, okay, maybe I can reallocate some of my qualified money into something like a self-directed plan. And now I can use some of that capital to go invest in notes. I can invest in a next real estate asset, and kind of restructure that to actually reduce your risk of having all your assets aligned to the market risk and volatility that's there, and also start to create some income, right, in another asset class. And then the same holds true, like, if you can borrow money at 8% from the bank, for on your, you're paid off half of your house. I mean, it's a myth to try to pay off your house, right? That
Yes, it
that's
is.
right. It doesn't make sense anymore in this debt-driven society that we're in. So you can get bank money at say 8% today, and then I can go leverage that and then put that into maybe something that's safe, like a note, a debt instrument, a credit. We also do private credit as
Yep.
well. And you can make a nice arbitrage on that. And by the way, here's two other benefits. You increase the mortgage interest deduction you have, so you make some improvements on your tax. And now you've actually taken more risk off of your back and given it to the bank. Because if you own that asset, you're actually more susceptible to creditor risk. And
Mhm.
now, if you give it back to the bank, right, the bank actually has more risk there. So there's some actually really nice plays. Again, if you start thinking creatively and outside of the box of conventional thinking.
So true. The mortgage broker in me always thinking, yeah, you pay off your house, and if you had a 5% mortgage rate, guess what? You saved your 5% when you could be making 12 or greater by taking that same money sitting there that you can't tap into. And when you need to tap into it, the banks aren't going to give it to you usually. And being smart with your money to go leverage that out there. I mean, that's like you said, that's one of the number one things that folks I think make a big, huge financial mistake on, especially as people moving or upsizing or downsizing every 7 to 10 years. It just doesn't make sense to me, you know.
Yeah. Yeah, 100%. So now we move into the last one, Scott, which I know you're going to love. You're going to be a really big fan of. So you can have your mindset dialed in and do all of this education, but it's really all about taking action and creating massive passive income. So here we want to be really focused on buying hard assets, right? And assets that are all non correlated to the stock market and drive what I like to call a trifecta, which is, can we create tax efficiency, passive income, and some type of forced appreciation? So obviously, real estate fits well into that. We understand how that works. So you want to buy real estate, but we also want to be buying other asset classes that complement that. Notes will fit into there nicely. Credit, oil and gas. So we just wrapped up an oil and gas fund, which is a great way to offset active income. Another, again, nice strategy to be able to do that. But how can we create this diversified portfolio that actually has lower risk and increasing your passive income and your tax efficiency?
Yep, love it, love it, love it. Leverage, make sure your risk is spread out of things, and then taking action in it. I love it, Dave. Great stuff. Great stuff.
You bet.
What is exciting you the most about 2026 and beyond? when it comes to Pantheon Investments and what your focus is?
Yeah, great question. It's really that software, Scott. I've got to say because I've struggled with trying to solve that problem for 25 years, and we finally got bold enough to say, you know what? There's no solutions in the market. There's very segmented things, like you might have, like there's a wealth front that does it, stocks, bonds, mutual funds, right? But it's like, look, we're all alternative focused, right? That just doesn't cut the mustard. And another great analogy is like, this is a great time, right? It's the beginning of the year, 2026. People might be thinking about, hey, I want to lose weight, right? Well, it's not that simple as to just like, hey, just jump on the scale and I want to kind of lose weight. So, number one, you need to start measuring yourself, but you need to start doing it in a comprehensive way. So, maybe I only want to lose weight by, say, 3%, but I want to improve my body composition. I want to increase my muscle mass and things like that. So, not until you can have really kind of comprehensive visibility on what you're doing, what you're tracking, and then start to make improvements on your performance. So, it's really the same with our wealth. And frankly, wealth is just a system, right? It's not about getting rich really quick. It's about putting systems in place. And as we put these systems in place, we create positive habits to support that. And your numbers will just start to become exponential if you're doing all of the right strategies.
So true on that. Follow strategy, stick with it, and be patient. It
Yes.
didn't happen overnight. It's not going to happen overnight, but a little bit of progress goes a long way. A little bit of that getting better 1% each day. At the end of 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, you're going to see definitely improvement in a lot of cases. Now that like I love how you say you won the family lottery of having triplets back in 2020. What are some things that you've done with your children and your kids that have to help them and it will help change the cycle? Because like you said, we weren't taught this earlier on. And what things have you implemented in teaching your kids, and how has that worked out for them?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things, and this is so interesting. So, my oldest is 27. The triplets are now 25, actually, and they're really interested in investing. They're working, and we've held mastermind discussions, and we do strategy. We talked about money in our family all while they're growing up, right? And one of the things that we've done, which I think is a big differentiator since then, to answer your question, is for probably over 15 years, my wife and I have been practicing the infinite banking, setting up properly structured cash value whole life policies. There's a lot of misunderstanding about what that is. And I've become such a proponent that I actually got licensed. And now
Yeah.
we kind of help our clients with that because it's kind of a big missing link. But the more and more family offices and ultra high net worth individuals we talk to, it's a complete cornerstone to what they do. And so, to answer your question, right now, my kids, instead of like getting a 401k, because they're all tempted with these employers to say, well, it's a 401k and we're doing this match. Well, is it really? And that's the first step into the system that you lose control over, right? So now they have policies, and my daughter, who's 27, has been funding. Let me give you a great example, right? This is such a great example, and I love to help people so they can change their thinking, right? In college, we set this up for her. She started funding through money she was saving through the summers, things like that. She then graduated, and her now husband, they moved into a house in Knoxville, Tennessee. They borrowed money from the IBC policy to use it as a down payment on a house. They did a fix and flip. In 18 months, Scott, they built up 130K in equity,
Nice.
flipped the property, then went and bought another property in Nashville, right? And then they were doing that, and they put the money, obviously put the proceeds back into the policy, kept funding that and everything. Now they just bought their third property in Charlotte and have been really growing that. And now, all at the same time, the money inside the policy has been growing tax free. They've had control to it. Now, obviously, if something happens to them, they have a death benefit, and it also transfers to future generations and avoids taxes and probate probate. So you have some estate planning built into that. So anytime, this is something ultra wealthy do, is anytime you can take, make a chess move and have a multiplier, and you can have like exponential results versus linear results, that's powerful.
That's so powerful. And it's got to make you smile and be very proud too, huh, Dave?
Oh yeah. Oh, it's a nice. They've made some nice chess moves on the board, and it's all about how they think. Yeah.
Now, you mentioned your mastermind. Can you talk a little about that and how folks could tap into that or take advantage of that?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, we have a highly curated group of people that are just looking to go deeper on all of these alternative strategies that are just really not taught anywhere. So everything from, unique tax strategies to estate planning to, how can we double, triple, 10x our passive income? How can we look at leverage? How can we create new opportunities, relationships, accountability inside of the community? One gentleman declared he's going to become a billionaire. He's well on his track, which is awesome. And then we do an annual event, which is coming up in February here in Sarasota, which is an amazing collection of people. We'll have guest speakers come in talking about, health, wealth, mindset, right? All of these real big things. And I'm a firm believer, just like you have a community that, being surrounded by like-minded people in a community are going to take you to the next level. If
Yes.
if you don't have exposure to different, communities, different environments, your container is going to be the same.
So true out there. What would you say is the best way for folks that are listening to this to find those different communities or the different millionaires who think differently or the people that are doing bigger and better things? What's the best way for them to do that on a local basis to find those different relationships?
Yeah, I think it comes back to that self-awareness, right? And really understanding, what are your true strengths? And then, what are those passions? What are those things that light you up? I mean, for me, this has just been like this obsessive journey because it's kind of fascinating and motivating to me.
Right.
I love the ability to be an entrepreneur in finance and think of creative strategies, like you're doing is one, right? How can we look at all these things to actually get, yield greater results, right? I mean, it's so entrepreneurial. So for me, think about something that totally fascinates and motivates you. Is a great way to describe it. And then look for thought leaders. Like if Scott is your guy and notes is your thing, just go in, double down on what he's doing and go in deep, right? Don't look anywhere else, right? Just go in deep and just make it happen. So that's what I would say.
I totally agree to that. Double down, drink from a fire hose as much as you can, and see who they're learning from or who taught them, and go that route. But you got
Yeah.
to be open. You can't be a secret agent, man or woman, and be successful in this world. You got to get out, network, and talk, and listen, and be coachable too. I mean, I know that a lot of folks they think they hear something, oh, you can't do that. Oh, you can't buy notes. That's illegal. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I'm
Right.
like, no, you got to understand that these strategies are around there, and the wealthy are taking advantage of it, and you have the same access to it too if you'll just take action and follow your roadmap to financial success, right, Dave?
You bet.
What's the best way for our listeners and audience out there to connect with you, to find out more about what you're doing, your OS and your mastermind and stuff like that for you?
Yeah, what I wanted to do for your audience is if any of that holistic wealth strategy resonated, is give your audience a free copy of the book.
Yeah.
You could just go to holisticwealthstrategy.com.
Awesome. We'll make sure to put that link in the description on the YouTube and the video stuff like that for you. Dave, this has been wonderful, man. I know that you got a little. Yeah, I think is that a suntan from living down in Sarasota, where you're at these
Yeah.
days?
It's been nice. Yeah, for
It's
sure.
very nice. Well, Dave, thank you so much for coming on, guys and gals. Take advantage, get that book, tap into resources, and do what Dave talked about. If you go out there, you learn, you apply yourselves, and you take action, and you follow his roadmap to success, you'll be sitting at the top. So go out, take some action, buddy, and we'll see you up there.